Happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome to Sports Scene Season 12, you guys. Happy summer, Episode 4. I am your host today, Tyler Meyerly, and I'm excited to be joined with three of my favorite guys, two incredible analysts, and then there's, Nick Kaufman. Just kidding, Nick. Everybody else, welcome Aiden Berg and Reagan Griffin Jr. How are you guys?
Doing great. How are you doing, Tyler?
I was doing better before you introduced me, Tyler.
Kaufman, we have to welcome you back in the only way we know how.
I'll take it. I'm happy to be back.
Okay, guys. Well, the top of our show today begins with big news out of USC's office. And yes, it's the news we've all been waiting for starting today. SC will begin phasing in athletes to return to campus for voluntary workouts. The health and safety plan is one that complies with LA County regulations, as well as NCAA and Pac-12 regulations. Phase 1 begins today and is for local athletes, those that live within 1 hour commute of campus. Phase 2 begins on July 6th and allows non-locals to return and those to reside on campus. And then phase 3 would begin July 13th and allow new student athletes to begin the process. There's a lot to unfold here. And guys, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to read into it more yet, but how do we feel about the plan to return, testing regulations, and does this make you more optimistic for an on-time start to college football?
I think it has to make you optimistic for an on-time start. I mean, people are slowly coming back to campus. I like the fact that it's so slow and moderate because they really want to get ahead of this and make sure that there aren't instances like there were at Clemson, Alabama, Houston. I think even LSU had a couple breakouts. So I think they're really trying to limit the spread of the disease, and they're really just trying to slowly kind of grandfather everyone into football and into action so that we're able to start on time in the fall with a healthy roster.
Yeah, I gotta disagree with you on that one, Nick. It feels actually even a little bit fast to me, and I don't know when is the ideal time to really start bringing people back because we've seen the cases across the country get worse in a lot of different states. And like you said, we've seen increases in people testing positive on these football teams who have come back. Like LSU had 30 players put in quarantine. Clemson had 23 positive tests. And it seems like USC is maybe taking it a little more seriously in terms of trying to prevent that. But still, I think it's a big problem that they only have weekly testing. That feels not consistent enough to me. A big thing with the NBA and the MLB's returns was like, you need to be testing every day for this stuff for it to work. And testing on a weekly basis feels to me like a lot of stuff is going to slip through the cracks, and it's only going to really get worse and maybe even push the season back further from if we had waited a little bit longer to get players back.
Especially when you think about Aiden, right? The idea of what are these players going to be doing when they're not practicing. That's what's always bugged me about this is a lot of these guys, they go out, they have their own apartments, they have their own dorm rooms, and they're entitled to having those things. But you can't really control what they do when they're not on the practice field or in the weight room. And that just leaves you open to so many variables to come and infiltrate into your locker room, especially when you, like you said, you're only testing once a week. So I'm not sure if there's, like you said, ever a good time to do this. I'm glad that they're doing it slowly and tediously, and they're proceeding with some semblance of a plan going forward. But, there's still that risk. And I do think you're going to see some positive cases in USC, in every college football locker room for that matter. The thing is so widespread. I don't think it's going to be anywhere where you're going to find people with no COVID.
But I think one of the important things to remember, sorry, Kyle, I'm going to cut you off really quick, but I think one of the important things to remember is that in California specifically, there's some really strict rules and laws in place to prevent the control and spread of corona, where you look at the other schools like Texas and Louisiana and Alabama, they are much looser and not strict. I have a friend, actually, she goes to Alabama. She's been there for the last month or so. She's gone out every single night. And it's almost like COVID doesn't exist there. Whereas in California, being in LA for the last couple of months, you have to go out with a mask. You have to take precautions. So I think just even the fact that the players will be coming to California, I think it'll really mitigate their chances of getting the disease in those off hours when they're not on the practice field, because there's so many precautions in place, not just in the state, but with restaurants, bars, grocery stores, everywhere. There's really a statewide effort to try and prevent the spread of the disease. So I think that is an advantage that USC has that some of these other schools don't.
So back to Reagan's point, and the university did specified that for those athletes in phase 1 that will be commuting to campus for these voluntary workouts, there's obviously the precautionary check-ins, but they did account for what the athletes should be doing behavioral wise when they are not on campus. So that does address that. I had the same question, Reagan, before, is you can't really address what these athletes are doing when they go home, who they're choosing to associate with. But I also think that if these players take into account how important it is to start by the end of August, that you would hope some of these kids would take the responsibility to take it a little bit more seriously. And then to Nick's point about, LA regulations. So LA County, let me tell you, in Southern California, LA County has the strictest regulations as pertains to COVID-19 precautions. So that might be why it took so long. Pac-12 made the announcement that starting June 14th, June 15th, that the universities could start implementing voluntary workouts. We are at June 24th. So it's not like they sprinted right out of the gate either. It has taken time. They've thought about it. But you're looking at a month and a half to the start of season. So is this enough time, especially with this 3 phase that they have?
It might not be enough time for USC because they have to face Alabama.
Yes.
If the schedule goes off all according to plan, they would have to face Alabama in the first week in Texas. So I don't think that it's enough time to prepare for Alabama, but I don't think that any amount of time was. I think that being said, with across sports, I think there is maybe a bit of an issue of people not considering how long it does take for athletes to get back in shape and get prepared to play a season. I know the NBA announced its plan long before the MLB did, but the MLB is planning to start its season before the NBA does, which I know MLB has like a full season to play and the NBA is just finishing theirs up. But it feels like maybe the MLB didn't take into account how long it does take for players to get back into shape. And that's only going to apply even more specifically to USC with a defense that has a whole new coaching staff and a lot of young players on it that they need to learn all like the game planning stuff. So from that perspective, both the physical perspective from like of health and then also preparing to perform at the highest level, specifically for USC, it seems like maybe a bad fit.
No doubt. And along those lines, you mentioned it, man. They have an entire new defense that they have to implement. And not only that, but you have to run through it's not a matter of just sitting in a classroom and taking notes. You have to go on the field and actually execute these things. And we're not even at a point right now. Like you said, we're only having the people in California get back into the room. We're not even having people across the country actually get back and are learning these things. And not even to mention the fact that you have to practice actual reps against each other. We're not even at a point now where these guys are able to have a physical contact on the field with each other. They're still socially distant workouts. So when you talk about a month and a half, it doesn't seem to me like you won't be able to have a semblance of actual walkthrough workout until about 2 weeks out from Alabama, which does not bode well for USC at all. When you're talking about an Alabama offense that's been established, the people there know what they're doing. You have Devontae Smith returning. You have Ladrian Walder returning. Bryce Young, I'm sure he knows what he's doing. So it's gonna be a tough swing. I'm not sure if it's realistic.
Yeah, but I think also this is an issue that every school is having to deal with. I mean, yeah, USC has a lot of new coaching staff, especially on the defensive side. But you look at it simultaneously, SC's had a lot of injury issues the last couple of years, and maybe this sort of delay in them being able to get back to contact and into practice could actually be a good thing, especially with the running backs, where you saw them so banged up last year. At one point, Amon-Ra was playing running back for a game. So I think really it'll help maybe just put less tread on the tires going into the season. And while they may not be as sharp on the field, I think they will be physically fresher, which could actually be a benefit to them later on in the season when, it's actually going to the games start to matter more and more.
I actually disagree with you on that, man. I mean, we even look at the NBA, right? Guys like Jason Tatum, De'Aaron Fox, guys heading into contract years. These guys are like, hold on, we need time to prepare. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with coming back with little time to prepare. My body might not be able to handle that load right off the bat. I think it'd be the same case, probably even more so with football. That's such a physically dominated game. I'm not so sure you want guys coming in without having at least, I think back to even high school, right? We would practice for 2-3 months before we even entered the season. The entire summer, these guys, we're talking about, maybe even 3 weeks with physical practice with these guys. It just does not seem feasible. And And granted, these are guys who've done this. They've been there and done that at a very high level. I'm just not so sure if you can just take the reins off and say go for these guys. I think it takes a little more than that.
Well, and you're obviously hoping that these guys, like I said, we're holding them accountable in the last 3 months that they have not been able to be on campus. So now, hopefully, they've been taking into account the physicality training. Now they just have to focus on implementing the contact and actually applying all the things that they've been training for, which we'll all get to see. Hopefully phase 1 goes well, phase 2 goes well once you introduce back those out of state players, and then phase 3 for all those new guys. But this is going to be something that we'll just have to wait and see, and hope that the university has taken all of the precautions. But like you guys mentioned, MLB, it has been almost 3 months of frustrating negotiations between the MLB and Players Union to come to an economic agreement, and that's the economic agreement to begin the 2020 MLB season. But as of yesterday, the two have come to not only that agreement, but also a health and safety protocol to begin. Opening day would take place on July 24th, so a month from now, with players being asked to report to training camp on July 1st, which is next week. Some of the highlights of how this season will take place: that universal designated hitter, extra innings starting with a runner on second, 60 regular season games structured to geographically accommodate teams, and a COVID-19 injured list, along with other precautions that are increasingly being recognized as necessary as coronavirus continues to spread, especially in states like Florida and Arizona. So I'm going to bring the gentleman back in here to jumpstart this conversation. You guys, who do you anticipate winning this year's World Series, since it'll be here sooner rather than later? And will their title have an asterisk?
First of all, whoever wins this year is not going to have an asterisk by their name. You can almost look at this as like a lockout shortened year. I mean, this was beyond really anyone's control, at least in terms of Corona. Obviously, with the back and forth between the players and the owners, that's a separate issue, but I don't think it'll have an asterisk because everyone's playing on an even playing field. And at the end of the day, we're getting a season. And that's the biggest thing that's coming out of this. We're getting a maybe third length of the baseball season. And as for who's going to win, the Los Angeles Dodgers. They are stacked from top to bottom. Aiden, cover your ears because I know you don't like this, but Mookie Betts will get to see him play in a Dodgers uniform, which, speaking for myself and I think the rest of the Dodgers nation, we're super excited to see what this new revamped team can do. And I think they're the only logical choice and the only team that can win this year.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't great for me to hear, Nick. And so I was thinking about picking the Dodgers because I know exactly what Mookie Betts can do for a team. However, I'm going to go with the Braves, actually, another team out of the National League. A little bit of a dark horse pick, I think, but something that kind of makes sense in the randomness of a shortened season. That's going to be a lot different from what we've seen in the past. They have a super deep bullpen, which is super helpful for a short season where maybe the starters are not going to have the same kind of energy or ability to keep going in games as usual. So that bullpen will really help. And then they have a really talented lineup with a lot of young, great hitters, and Acuna, Freddie Freeman is a great veteran, but also Ozzy Albies from as like a younger player. And then Marcell Ozuna is a big bat, and he can play DH now under those universal designated hitter rules in the NL. So I think that they kind of like fit a lot of what you're looking for from a team that is going to be able to really take advantage of what is different and what is new about this season. And then also, I just didn't really want to pick a favorite because that's no fun. But in terms of the asterisk question, I agree with Nick. I don't think that there's going to be any asterisk on this. There's even in non-lockout shortened seasons, I think there's always some sort of explanation for why some other team could have won the championship, but it only gets brought up if there's like a shortened season or if something particularly crazy happens. But you look at every season in pretty much every team professional sport, even in college, there's always like something that happened kind of randomly along the way that really helped determine the decision. But that team that still like goes all the way and figures it out and kind of like perseveres through this, I think it could actually even make this championship more impressive to deal with some of the changes and some of the new things that are going on with this season. So Braves win the championship, no asterisk.
Yeah, when I think about an asterisk season, we think about Houston. We just saw it. That's a team that was playing on a different playing field than all of the other teams in baseball. So long as the playing field is even for everybody, there's no reason for there to be an asterisk season. Now, what I'm not going to do is feign any sort of intelligence or aptitude for baseball. You guys know I know nothing, but I do know that the Yankees are always good. So I'm just going to take a shot in the dark and say that the Yankees are my favorite. I know just about 4 baseball players in total. I know Bryce Harper. I know Mike Trout. I know Aaron Judge, maybe 3. But I know Aaron Judge can hit the thing. So I'm going to say the Yankees are my favorite to win.
Yeah, what's so unique about how fast they have to jump into all of this is we know that the discussions about starting season again was not about health and safety concerns. The biggest delay was in the economic agreement between MLB owners, the league, and the players union. So that's what took so long. And now you're looking at it like, hey guys, you have a week to report to your team's facilities. And then you throw into the mix that, some of these guys now have to go to states where it's a little where COVID-19 is more it's at higher risk than maybe some of the states where they're coming from. I am anticipating that you will see players maybe pull back in terms of health and safety, not in terms of COVID-19, but in terms of player longevity and wanting to protect themselves that way. But I agree. I think because everybody is starting at the start of their season, it is a shortened season, but it is not necessarily we started our season like basketball and now we're jumping back in. So I think if you win the title, you win the title and you get it. You just had, about a third of the season that you had to play compared to normal. I will also jump with Nick Kaufman and say that my pick for World Series is going to be the Dodgers. You guys, there's no other team that's gotten like so close and it just being ripped away so many times. And then you throw into the mix that I know the city of LA is really excited to see Mookie Betts. And not only that, but, a lot of people are sad to see him go. So the Dodgers are also my pick because they're out of 60 games. They're the ones I can see at least winning 40 of those games. And a lot of this is what teams are capable of winning the most amount of games in such a short amount of time. I mean, before we know it, September 24th or whatever it is going to be here and we're headed into baseball postseason. At least that time of year will feel the same.
Exactly. And another thing you need to remember is like last year, the Washington Nationals had a very slow start. They were out of it until the very end. They pretty much got in on essentially the last day of the season. So what this favors is teams who can really get out to a hot start and dominate from the get-go. The Dodgers have the lineup to it. Plus, you look at it, Clayton Kershaw now doesn't have to play a full season. He only has to play a third of a season. He'll get that much more rest. He'll be that much more amped and ready for the playoffs in the postseason. So we may not see postseason Kershaw anymore, but we might see middle of the regular season Kershaw, which would be a nice change for the Dodger fans out there.
That's another name I know, Clayton Kershaw.
There we go. I'm proud of you, Reagan. I'm glad you know that.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, you just acknowledge the fact too that obviously I think for pitchers, this is going to be the most difficult with jumping back into the mix of things. I know, Aiden, we discussed how short 3 weeks is to really prepare, especially for a pitcher position. The good thing is that teams can now have the expanded option of players to choose from. So you're not so limited to the roster that you get to pick from. That might help alleviate some of the overexhaustion. Aiden.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the other 2 picks that were made in this call. I see that they both have the same problem, which is that everyone knows the Dodgers for getting really far in the playoffs and then kind of like choking it away because they, for whatever reason. But
because they were,
we all know the reason. We know the reason.
But people are underrating the fact that the Yankees have been the exact same way the last few years. They keep getting into the playoffs. They keep getting their fans' expectations up. And I promise I'm not only saying this as a Red Sox fan, but the Yankees are kind of the Dodgers of the AL. They get there every year and then they just kind of fall apart. So
I mean, the one thing I have
a team that has shown that it doesn't choke in the playoffs, even though it hasn't really been there yet.
And my one gripe with what you said is the Yankees haven't made it to a World Series. The Dodgers have made it to 2 of the last 3. And in one of them,
so they're even worse. I'm sorry, Reagan. That's a bad
in one of them, maybe even 2 of them, The Dodgers were cheated against. They were cheated out of the World Series. So,
all right, guys. Let's move into something that maybe Reagan can talk about just a tad, but also the other sport that we're all excited to watch come back. Lakers' Avery Bradley announced he will not be resuming the season and cites family as the primary reason. This gives the Lakers a chance to sign a replacement, eyeing J.R. Smith as the top prospect. The NBA and NBPA obviously gave players a chance to decide on their own whether they felt comfortable, and they have to make that decision by today. If Avery Bradley is out, do you guys anticipate more players following suit? And if yes, what will that mean for the NBA season?
100%. And thank you, Tyler, for entering back into my comfort zone a little bit. I definitely outfit right back there. But yeah, there's no doubt. And we saw it with the whole Kyrie thing. No matter where you stand on what Kyrie was proposing or what he was basically purporting to the NBA owners, there is no doubting that there are a bunch of players that were behind Kyrie, and he was speaking for a lot more than just a small minority of the NBA. There's a lot of guys, Dwight Howard, Avery Bradley, Kyle Kuzma, or maybe not Kyle Kuzma, but there's a significant amount of guys who are hesitant about coming back to the NBA, whether it's for the social moment that we're currently in or the disease, the COVID-19 deal. So I do think that there's going to be a lot more players than just Avery Bradley that decide not to come back. I think Avery Bradley is just going to be the guy that we look in hindsight and say that was the trailblazer that allowed a bunch of people to feel comfortable with saying that I don't feel comfortable coming back. So I do think that we're going to see a lot more of this, and it's going to have a substantial impact on how these playoffs play out.
Yeah, I completely agree with Reagan on this. And also there is the corona concern, obviously, for some players, and with Avery Bradley seeing him sit out. Also, Jokic, I think it was. He was in Serbia now we're in I'm out of my comfort zone with basketball, Reagan. So we swap places, but I know that Jokic was in Serbia in his home country, and he went to a tennis tournament. I'm bringing tennis into this episode, where they had this giant tournament with no social distancing rules, no guidelines, no anything. And I mean, it literally was a week-long party with all the athletes in a club partying on stage. It did not look that good. And so now everyone's getting corona from it. Jokic is getting it too. And so I think that's going to be a concern for the NBA players, is even with Jokic coming back, how comfortable are they with having a player who's known to have corona? Even if it might have gone away, would they still feel comfortable sharing a court and being with a player who's had the virus?
Yeah, and I think, you know, what you said, Reagan, about Avery Bradley maybe being considered a trailblazer. We actually have seen two other players kind of opt out in recent days, but it's for kind of different reasons, which I think is why Avery Bradley is considered that way. It also helps that he's a Laker, but I digress. Trevor Ariza actually opted out because he would have to miss a court date for a custody battle for his children, which is obviously a very legitimate thing to miss a basketball tournament for. And then also we had Davis Bertans, who is entering free agency, opt out because he didn't want to go back and maybe get injured. He had like a really great season this year and didn't want to potentially get injured and hurt his stock on the open market. And so I think both of those guys made kind of the right choice dealing with the concerns that they had with having to be in this tournament for so long. And that's where I think you're going to see the most people kind of opting out, is for those reasons that COVID has affected everyone. It's kind of like across the map. And so there are going to be a lot of those types of situations where there are concerns that arise because of being gone for that amount of time. And any players like that will definitely sit out. And so I hate to agree with you guys, because we always love to have debate on this show, but I certainly agree there's going to be more players opting out. And where I think the interesting part is where you see multiple impact players on the same team potentially leaving. You know, Avery Bradley on his own, I don't consider him to be like a deal-breaking loss for the Lakers. But if Dwight Howard also leaves, is losing two of their bench players too much for the Lakers to overcome? And which of these teams are going to really be affected by this?
So, and Avery Bradley made the announcement that obviously he cited family for this reason. You know, his son having, I believe, respiratory illness that is difficult for him to recover from. We know that at the Disney World they would be enclosed in a place. So, maybe at that point he could have made the decision to have his family stay home, and he would make the move without him. I think that would be the equivalent of the amount of time that honestly MLB players probably spend away from their family, and especially would be in this short amount of time. So there's that, and there's maybe ways around it. We know that Avery Bradley, is trailblazing on the social justice end. So, and he made sure to make the comment that he would be taking the time to still be doing that. Um, Obviously, hoping, still taking precautions for his family, if that's being a main reason why. Why I also think you may see more players follow suit would be because you guys, the Lakers, from before even season started through to when basketball ended in March and still up until this point, have been the front runner for the Western Conference. So to have an athlete from their team voluntarily step back and say, I'm not going to resume season, that's a little concerning, because then you look at players from teams who maybe their heart isn't fully in it for the remainder of the season, and maybe they aren't as confident in their team as, say, the Lakers are, and us Laker fans. What really is tying them to come back? And then when you take all of that into consideration, will this NBA title come with an asterisk?
That one's a little bit more tricky, because knowing the way NBA fans operate, right? It's very social media driven, and a lot of it comes from excuses, right? So me as a Lakers fan, I could easily dig myself into the rabbit hole of saying if we lose, it's because we didn't have Avery Bradley. And I could do that. And right, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of teams who do the same thing. I'm going to get into why I don't think the Clippers, the Lakers, or the Bucks are going to win the NBA championship. We'll save that for another time. But the Clippers could easily say, man, if we'd had the time at the end of the regular season to get everybody on the court healthy at the same time, we would have won the championship. If the Bucks would have said we didn't have Giannis at his house without a hoop for 3 months, we would have won the championship. So I do think that the way NBA fans will operate, they might slap an asterisk on whoever wins the championship this season. Would I do it? No, because again, we're all operating under the same conditions. It's going to be up to the individuals on each team to make that distinction for themselves, whether or not they want to come back. But everyone's operating on the same playing field here, so I would not put an asterisk on the season.
Well, let's also include with what you just said. If the Clippers do not win, they cannot use that as an excuse, because let's remember they left off season with quite a chunk of their team being injured, and I would say they've had plenty of substantial time to get a little bit better. Do you think that Avery Bradley stepping away was maybe not for health concerns and anything else? And how does moving into this, maybe do you see it halting the start of NBA season?
I don't.
Because let's remember this. The 24th was supposed to be a hard deadline for players to report to their team whether or not they would be playing, and now it's been kind of pushed into a soft zone. So
yeah,
I think what it does is it actually gives basketball the opportunity to push their start date later to Christmas time. I mean, even Mark Cuban's gone on and said it. He wishes the NBA would start later, because right now when the NBA starts, it's in the middle of college football and the NFL season. And everyone's focused on that because it's the middle of the playoff race. Things are really getting heated up in title and conference races going on in football. And then in basketball, the season's just starting. There's nothing really that exciting going, because once again, it's an 82-game season. So there's a long way to go. There's plenty of games to be watched. So if they push the start date later to around Christmas time, I think not only would it benefit the players getting those extra couple of months off from when this season ends to next season, but also it would allow the NBA to bring in more viewers, because now it's football's over. Now we can all focus our attention again on basketball. So it would have much more of the national attention than it does right now. So I think really this kind of provides maybe like an unseen opportunity for basketball to really make their mark and change and shift the way that their season operates, so that they can really maximize its viewership.
Yeah, the biggest concern about shifting that schedule back is, will people want to watch NBA when they're like on vacation in July and August? And this is going to provide them with a kind of example of, is there an appetite for watching sports in August? We know like people go on vacation, and maybe it's like typically baseball season, so they're more attuned to that. But that's always been the big question. We're definitely going to get an answer out about that.
I think that's part of the appeal, actually. I think part of the appeal for the NBA as far as an entertainment standpoint is that pushing into the summer actually works better for their entertainment and marketing standpoint. you will have more viewers with people being home. From a business and franchise standpoint, though, that's the time that those players are used to being at home with their kids. And that's where they anticipate seeing that pushback. I don't anticipate the NBA season being pushed back anymore. I actually think it is going to start on time as what they have proposed, with or without a lot of players, with or without a lot of key players on some of their franchise teams. Reagan, I would like to circle back to what you said. We brought up Clippers, we brought up Lakers. And this could be an interesting one, but here comes Reagan with his hot take for this week. Take it away, Reagan.
I won't beat around the bush because I really already said it. So I will just come right out. I don't think the Lakers are winning the championship this year. I don't think the Clippers are winning the championship this year. And I don't think the Milwaukee Bucks are winning the championship. Here's why. The Bucks, they're a team that we've seen enter the playoffs. And obviously, we can assume that they're going to improve based off their last performance. But they have a bunch of players on that team that are historically playoff chokers, right? I won't place that label upon Giannis yet. We've only seen him in one real playoff burst, so I won't say he's a playoff choker, but we know Eric Bledsoe is nowhere to be found come playoff time. We've seen Chris Middleton have the highest of highs and the lowest of lows come playoff time. We've seen Brook Lopez take his game down a lot come playoff time. We've seen consistently the players around Giannis not be as apt come playoff time. So I don't think Milwaukee's suited to go win a championship in this season unless Giannis is ready to shoulder the burden of his entire team, a way that we've yet to see him do. The Clippers, right? Their biggest advantage all year long. We're not worried about the regular season. We don't care what happens. We're going to rest our players. We're going to make sure that we're healthy come playoff time. Well, guess what, Clippers? Everybody has just been resting for the past 3 months. Everybody's 100% healthy, ready to go. Assuming that most people's, the majority of their team comes back, everybody's going to be 100% fresh. And now you have the disadvantage because you've had your team basically segmented all year long. There's been stretches where Kawhi's out. There's been stretches where Paul George out. There's been stretches where Lou Williams out. And none of the guys have all been together on the court at the same time. We were just starting to see inklings of that at the end of the season, right before it got shut down. The Clippers have no idea how they're going to play together when everyone's 100% healthy. That's why I think they're ruled out. And then when you come to the Lakers, we just talked about it. Avery Bradley's going to be sitting out. There's a decent chance that Dwight Howard's already sitting out. And we were already having questions about the Lakers' depth. Now it really looks like that there's a decent chance that we're really just going to be looking to LeBron James and Anthony Davis and then a bunch of role player guys that have been fairly inconsistent. If you look at J.R. Smith and Deion Waiters, and we're starting to look at those guys as viable options for depth pieces on the Lakers, it's a problem. So I don't think any of those three teams are going to win. The teams that I think have the best opportunity are the teams that knew who they were, they knew who their identity was before this happened, right? That's why I don't think the Bucks, the Lakers, or the Clippers have it. I look more like the Heat. I look more like, I hate to say it, but the Celtics, teams that knew exactly who they were before the coronavirus outbreak happened. Those are the teams that have the best opportunity, assuming that they have all of their players come back.
Okay, Reagan, this is where you're wrong. I think the Lakers are going to win it, and because you look at it, they have two of arguably the top 3 or top 5 players in the NBA right now. You just gave LeBron James and Anthony Davis 3 months to get rested, get healthy, and be 100% fit come playoff time. There is a zero, they are going to be going after it every single game because now it's no longer a marathon of the season. For these two guys, it's a sprint to the finish line, and we've seen what LeBron can do with nobody on his team like he did with the Cavs for so long. Now you give him basically a comparable running mate in Anthony Davis, who's arguably as good as LeBron or almost as good as LeBron, and suddenly they're healthy, they're fully rested. There's no one that can stop this duo in the league, especially now that they've had the time off, especially with LeBron being at the age he is. I think this plays directly into the Lakers' hands because even though they might be missing a few depth players, they won't really need them because they could just send LeBron out there and have him be LeBron at 100%.
Surprise, surprise, the SoCal kid has 2 LA teams winning their championships this season. That definitely doesn't have anything to do with it. I'm also going to disagree with Reagan too, though. I think that those 3 teams are really kind of the only teams that have a chance to win. And I think that this actually accentuates that. And here's why. With the long break of the season, you don't have those reps built up throughout the season. You don't have that kind of practice time built up throughout the season. I think that this is going to come down to basically pure talent. And yes, there's going to be a lot of concerns about like which players maybe are going to be out, which teams are going to lose their stars because they got the coronavirus and they have to take a 2 or 3 week break. But I think that there is enough. You gave me enough teams as an example anyway, that one of those teams is going to make it through without seeing significant issues, like losing like a star player or something. And because it's all about talent, those are the 3 most talented teams in the league by far. And so I think that those are the 3 teams that are really the only ones that have a significant shot. And I do hate to say that as a fan of one of the teams in that kind of second tier that you were talking about, Reagan, but the Heat, really?
I do, because the Heat had a very strong identity going in. They knew who they were. They were a gritty, defensively sound team that was headed by Jimmy Butler and a bunch of guys who could shoot the basketball well. And then you had Bam Adebayo floating on both ends of the floor, the all-star that he was. But with the Lakers, it's just so fluctuating. And I've watched this team all season, and I know that as much as that team hinges upon the talent of LeBron James and Anthony Davis, it's just as hinged. Maybe not just as hinged, but there's a lot on the 3-point shooting, right? And I don't think that they're going to have it, man. I've had my concerns about it all year. I don't think that they're going to have the 3-point shooting that they need, because the thing is, LeBron James and Anthony Davis have the most lethal pick and roll in the NBA, but that only works when you have the space to operate. If the defense can collapse on that and they don't have to worry about the shooting, which they really haven't had to all season long, then it's not going to be sustainable. So I do think that the Lakers, the depth that they have, I'm not. When I'm looking at Kyle Kuzma and J.R. Smith and Dion Waiters as the guys that I'm going to beyond LeBron James and Anthony Davis, it's not a good sign. And I hate to say that as a Lakers fan. I want to emphasize that I'm a Lakers fan. I hope they win the championship, but I just don't see it as realistic. Same with the Clippers. They just don't know how to play together. And then with the Bucks, I don't think that they have that playoff gene within them yet.
You don't think the Lakers had their identity figured out at the point at which season got cut short?
Their identity.
Because I agree that maybe not going into the season they had it down, but I would say the Lakers that we all saw going into this break, I mean, everybody had some pretty good confidence in that was going to be the team and they were going to take it away.
No doubt. No, I'm not saying that the Lakers didn't have an identity established. I'm just not sure if the identity that they established is going to be enough to carry them throughout the playoffs, right? The identity was we have LeBron James handling and facilitating the offense, and we have Anthony Davis playing off of him offensively, and then defensively, he's basically, I would assert he's the best defensive player in the NBA. I know there might be some differences there, but I don't think LeBron James and Anthony Davis are enough in this stacked NBA with a bunch of teams to do it. We've seen LeBron James in the past. He's always needed some semblance of depth to get him there. Even when it was that last season with the East, you had to have some semblance of depth, or else you get absolutely crashed and burned by the Warriors at some point. So there's always going to be a team that comes across your face, and it's stacked as the West is. That is going to happen sooner rather than later for the Lakers. So I do think that if we're looking at it from a depth standpoint, I'll always say that, as much as talent wins in the NBA, you got to have some depth too. You can't look at a team that won in the past couple of years without depth. So I don't think the Lakers are going to have the depth to do it, as much as I hate to say it.
Reagan,
so I think
I know you're saying this right now, but don't worry. When the Lakers win this year, we'll still invite you to the parade. You can still come.
Hey man,
to the
I'll
Lakers
be right there. I'll be right there with my mask, and I'll be ready to go.
I was going to say, I think the only 2 reasons that maybe you wouldn't see the Lakers play the same as the Lakers we saw before would be one, shoot, I forgot my first one. Would be one, oh no, I did one that they're in LA, and that LA had probably the strictest regulations out of places, at least out here on the West Coast. That would be the first one that I see coming out of it. And then 2 would be that the Lakers have some of the most prominent players that are looking to take a stand in terms of leading these injustice issues. And, that's something that people are still putting a lot of focus on right now. And so when you have such prominent players where right now, for at least the next couple of weeks, where do you, it's not that one should be ranked higher than the other, but when you are putting such big focus on 2 very important things, obviously, and I'm not saying one's more important than the other, but you're looking at one is where do you stand in your community and society, and the other one being where do you stand in your job and your market, kind of, you're going to be, it's overwhelming. And it's not only overwhelming for anybody, but it's overwhelming for an athlete that is now in a bubble. So maybe that might be a little bit more distracting for a team, like you said, where this is maybe the first year that you have being, where they have that dynamic that can win. But you guys, this year, I mean, look at this year and how they started it. I can't see any reason why the Lakers wouldn't come away with the title. You start the year off with, okay,
Aiden,
okay,
you're a
but you
Celtics
start,
fan. Your
you
opinion
start
doesn't count on the Lakers.
I was going to say it's
with a
because of the
tragic,
Clippers, but
but you start the year off with a tragic death of one of the greatest Lakers, and that already started off the year with being like, the Lakers are going to win for Kobe. Then you go into all these other things, and it's just been trickled down. This would be an amazing year to win, not only for the Lakers organization, but for the city of LA.
It would be a great year. It would be a great year for the Lakers to win. And that is the only time that I'm ever going to say that in my entire life. That this is the only year that I would ever even be slightly okay with the Lakers winning a championship. But you guys, you're really showing, and I do have to admit this, why LA is always going to be a Laker town, because you're ignoring the team that beat the Lakers in 3 out of their 4 matchups this season and was playing just about as well as them, towards the end of the season before it got cut off. I think that the Clippers have a clear advantage. I have to disagree with what you said before, Reagan. I think that the idea that they're at a disadvantage because they were always relying on the health aspect and being healthy in the playoffs and more healthy than anyone else, it's a point, but like it's not as strong as your points on the Lakers and the Bucks, because if you look at this roster top to bottom and you look at the entire NBA, the Clippers have the best top to bottom roster when healthy of any team, in my opinion. And they have that depth that you were talking about, Reagan. They have the stars in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, who can really help kind of carry them over the top. I see them as kind of having the best, I guess, situation for them to be able to kind of just go into this playoffs, do what they need to do, rely on their talent all the way across the roster. And I think that they're kind of my favorite to take this, especially with some of the Lakers players potentially maybe, sitting out.
But that's when healthy. I mean, the last handful of games, they weren't even able to play. You look at Leonard, Beverly, and Paul George.
But they've had that time to kind of get back healthy.
But off season-ish, not like game-wise,
It's fair.
My overarching point on the Clippers was less that they needed the time to be healthy and that they weren't a healthy team, but it was just because that they weren't a healthy team. They never had that point within the season where they were all healthy at the same time playing together. That's my point on the Clippers, is that entering this playoffs, now you're going to have Kawhi and Paul George and Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams and the Morris brother and who's the dude they just signed? Reggie Jackson. You have all of these dudes, right, who have all come together, this collection of talent that has really no idea how to play with one another. This is the first time that we're seeing this roster rolled out holistically, and I think it's going to crash and burn. I honestly do, because they're going to get to a point where you're going to have Reggie Jackson trying to do something when Kawhi Leonard's over here waiting for the business. You know what I mean? They don't know how to play with each other. They haven't practiced with each other, and there's not enough time for them to prepare to have some actual chemistry with one another. I just don't think, talent wins a lot in basketball, but it's not the end-all be-all. I think you need some semblance of chemistry, which they just lost.
I agree actually completely with Reagan on this. You look, even the Lakers at the beginning of this season, they really struggled kind of figuring out their identity. You looked early in the season, they kind of grinded and scrapped their way through a couple games, really having to rely on the talent of LeBron and Anthony Davis to get them over the finish line, to get those wins. But as the season started progressing and as the team had more time to play together, they started to gel. And finally, from like the midpoint of the season on till where we are now, they really started rolling as a team and really looked and were reaching their full potential. Whereas the Clippers, they haven't had that luxury of almost a quarter or half of a season of everyone playing together in sync, knowing exactly how to play to best complement everyone's strengths.
And you guys, we are literally talking about things that get us all excited in terms of sports. But with the 3 we talked about today, football, MLB, baseball, and basketball, all at the mercy of ultimately coronavirus, it's going to be interesting to see how these things all play out in the next couple weeks, next couple months, and ultimately the remainder of what would be a full year. I would like to thank all three of you gentlemen for joining me today. It is always a good time here on Sports Scene. Thank you all of you guys for viewing. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we will see you back here next week.